banjo on my knee. I'm going to Louisiana, my true love for to see. It rained all night the day I left, the weather it was dry. The sun so hot I froze to death. Susanna, don't you cry. Oh, Susanna, oh, don't you cry for me. I've come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee.
Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I never get back. Let me root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes.
Your old gray bonnet with the blue ribbon on it while I hitch up into the chair. And through the fields of clover we'll drive up to Dover on our golden wedding day.
A little phonograph, a little piece of practical poetry. Mary had a little lamb that speaks by the snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go.
Fairy tale can come true, it can happen to you. If you're young at heart, for it's hard you will find to be narrow of mind. If you're young at heart, you can go to extremes with impossible schemes. You can laugh when your dreams fall apart at the seams, and life gets more exciting with each passing day. And love is either in your heart or on its way. Don't you know that it's worth every treasure on earth to be young at heart? For as rich as you are, it's much better by far to be young at heart. And if you should survive to 105, look at all you derive out of being alive. Now here is the best part, you have a head start if you are amongst the very young at heart. If you're young at heart, if you're young at heart.
It's the talk and play. Off, you set this to talk, and I don't know where the pickup is. I guess maybe this is both the speaker and the microphone, but it would record, and then you could play back. And I'm not sure how many times you can get out of that one disc. My guess is not many. And now I'm sure it's lost already.
Your heart stops and goes. The world's full of babies with arrows and bows. When love comes swinging along, each kiss is a tonic. You don't mind the rain. There's something symphonic in any old strain. When love comes swinging along, you sing it's spring. You've never seen the sky so sunny before, and you're quite sure if it's not paradise, it must be. Come, all ye thankful, joyful and triumphant. Oh, come ye to Bethlehem. Turn off your light, Mr. Moonman. Go and hide your face behind the cloud. Can't you see that couple for the spoon man? Two is company and three's a crowd.
This is just an incredible night, and I'm just delighted to be here. to be the MC and the host of this. I'm Jack Arnicke, and I've been asked by the board and staff at the Museum of Science and Innovation, MySci, the former Schenectady Museum, to be your MC tonight, and I am thrilled to be here for this historic occasion because, as most of you know, my old business had a little something to do with recording sound. And I look at the table out there and look down at all the recording equipment. At the very end, there's a tape recorder, and that's where I started. So it's just remarkable. In just a while, you will be able to listen to something that has not been publicly played in more than 130 years. No, it's not my first newscast. You are going to hear the oldest recorded American voice, and you're going to hear, quite possibly, the oldest playable recording of music in the world, all here in Schenectady. This has drawn a huge amount of interest. There have been stories on AP, the Associated Press. NBC is interested. CBS, in fact, all the networks, the BBC, Wall Street Journal, London Telegraph, PBS, Atlantic Monthly, and on and on. This event that you are here at tonight has drawn interest from all over the world. Now, many of you already know about the incredible transformation that's taking place at MySci. And tonight is another milestone as MySci moves to become a regional science center and attract national and international attention to the high-tech opportunities happening right here in the Capital Region. In many ways, this is the perfect story to highlight our region. It connects our high-tech past with our high-tech present and our high-tech future, and shows the role that this Capital Region, this place right here, will play in our country's efforts to rediscover our advantage in technology, manufacturing, and STEM education, something sorely lacking in this country and which needs to be strongly revitalized. Let me start by welcoming some of the people who have joined us here tonight. Neil and Jane Gola. The MySci story cannot be told without thanking them for their vision, their drive, and their generosity, and I know that I speak for everyone in thanking both of you for everything that you do for MySci and for the community. Neil and Jane Gola, down here in front. A couple of other people to recognize: Gerald Fabris, the curator of the Edison National Historic Site; Vince Riggi, Schenectady City Councilman; Jim Salengo, the Downtown Schenectady Improvement Corporation. Thank you for being here this evening. And thanks to all of you for coming out and supporting this program for MySci. You may give yourselves a round of applause. Now come on, a hearty one. That's the way. That's the way.
I said, Chris, you know, I think we could build a machine to play this again. And he looked at me and he smiled very politely, and I could read his mind, and his mind said, yeah. Right? And to some extent he was right. I wouldn't be able to take the time to create that machine, but I couldn't let go of that thought. And a few weeks later, I reached out to a good friend of mine at GE Research and Development, who's still there. We used to work together. And said, Russ, is Russ here? Russ Kmuth here? Yeah. Great. So Russ is down over here. I said, look, why don't you meet? Let's check this out. And we looked at the films. We talked about it. We sort of had to reverse engineer just from the film what it might take to play this back. We took guesses as to optics. We took guesses as to film speeds and so forth. This was a lot of fun because there's no sprocket holes in this, right? So it made it interesting. We took a shot at it, and he went back to his home shop, and he worked nights and weekends on his own nickel. And he built a machine, and son of a gun, if it didn't work, it didn't play. We went through these films, and we have 13 of these films, and they have just all sorts of things, 25 sort of shows, many of them musical. One is just phenomenal, and I can remember the day we played it. It's the Golden Jubilee for the invention of the light bulb, the 50th anniversary of the invention of the light bulb. That's, in 1929, that was the 50th anniversary, right? And this is In October, it's right before the crash. Hoover gets up and he talks. Edison gets up and he talks. You could tell that he was hard of hearing. You could hear the way he spoke. It's just an amazing thing. Einstein calls in from Berlin. This is pre-war. Just a phenomenal thing. And we all looked at, we stood around looking at each other, and I still get the goosebumps talking about this and thinking about this. So I think Chris, we were taking some of the data off one day, and Chris brought out this box. And I think this was his big challenge to us, because we had been a lot more successful than we thought we would be. And in this box, what's that? It's really phenomenal. And Russ and I looked at each other, and I could sort of read his mind, he could read mine, and we went, could we do this? But you can't touch that, right? You have to do it optically, and Carl, Dr. Haber, will talk about how he ultimately did it. We decided we just wouldn't be able to do this. But it turned out, Chris stuck with it, and he found out that there was a lab, Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, where they digitize things like this and try to get the sound off, right? So that, that's found sound. So that's why we're here tonight. This is some of the equipment. You can see this outside. Russ brought one of the units. So in this case, this film is brought around in front of a light source, and there's a little electronic gizmo that takes in light and turns it into electricity, and we can run that through an amplifier and make a speaker move. Right, and that's how this thing works. And of course, Chris found this phenomenal photograph way after we built the machine. Right? If we had seen this, we would have been able to build it. So, thanks, Chris. So this is amazing. And I'll just briefly describe what goes on here. It's about 5 inches wide and 15 inches long or so. This was wrapped around the cylinder, right? So this is some of the old Edison recording equipment, if you will. So you wrapped it around that cylinder. That cylinder was on a crank, so you crank that cylinder. A little stylus laid down on the film, and it was connected to a diaphragm, which was connected to a horn. Okay, and so as you spoke, the vibration from the sound wiggled that diaphragm, which wiggled that stylus, which put tiny little dimples in that in an aluminum foil as you turn the crank, and this whole thing moved as you turn the crank. Okay, so what you made was one long groove that would go in a minute or so. Right? And that's what you see here. Right? That's actually one big long groove, slightly offset, that wraps all the way around. Okay. So that is sort of found sound senior. The other is found sound junior. Problem with this is, there aren't many of these left. There are about a dozen known. These things were usually novelty acts almost. People would record and in public, and then they'd snip the foil up and give it away as souvenirs. So there aren't many of them around, about a dozen. Only 3 of which have pedigree where people know the dates. One of them is at the Smithsonian, and it had been folded and mutilated and probably will never be playable. One is at the Edison Museum, and then one is right there. Okay. In all the world, you go all the way back, and this is the beginning. And it's here in front of you.
In 1878, things were just a little bit different around here. They hadn't started Metroplex yet. Joseph Graham is the mayor of Schenectady, a city of 13,000, which ends at Knott Terrace. That was the end of the city. And then after that, you got Vale Cemetery and some farms and country estates. A little ways from here, the Knott Memorial at Union College was nearing completion after being under construction for 22 years. You could work a lifetime on one building in the construction trades back then. Schenectady got its first telephone 2 years before this recording. The Erie Canal brought passengers and cargo through downtown Schenectady on what is now a broad boulevard. In 1878, if you wanted to hear music, you had to go to a live performance. There were no albums, no 8-tracks, no cassette tapes, no CDs, no radio. Today we can put hundreds, thousands of songs on one teeny little device or on your telephone, if you still call it a telephone, and listen to it with just by plugging in some little earbuds, turning up the volume, and ruining your hearing for old age. Tonight, we're going to show you the very, very first step in that. The first time that music was able to be recorded, transported, and then played somewhere else. This begins the evolution of how we listen and how we learn, and in many ways how we live, part of the important part of the environment that we live in. Let me introduce to you Dr. Carl Haber, who has joined us today all the way from San Francisco. Dr. Haber is an experimental physicist who received his PhD in physics from Columbia University. He's a senior scientist in the physics division of Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory at the University of California. Most of his research interests involve the development of instrumentation and methods for detecting and measuring particles created at high-energy colliders, such as the Large Hadron Collider in CERN. These interests have also led him and his colleagues to apply techniques in use in the research to the topic of sound restoration. He is a fellow of the American Physical Society and of the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation. We are very grateful for him for making this trip all the way across the country to here tonight to enlighten us on this project and to, for the first time since 1878, play this recording publicly. Dr. Haber.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just give me a moment to switch the presentation. Okay, can everybody see that? Can you hear me? Yes. Yes. Thank you very much for the introduction and the invitation to be here. I'm very pleased to be able to join you this evening. I was very happy to see young people, school students come in the audience because it's really important for them to learn about the history of science and technology, so I'm really happy you're here, everyone. So we're going to talk about playing back this 1878 Edison tinfoil recording tonight. I'm going to take a little bit of time to get to that. You're really going to hear it on one of the last slides because I want to give you the context, tell you the story, and illuminate as much as I can the story and the significance of sound recording and how it was invented, and also how we try to restore it. So, in 1877, as we were told, Thomas Edison invented the phonograph. Other people had already recorded sound before that, but they had not done so in a way that would enable it to be played back. So Edison was the first to record and reproduce sound. This was really the transformative invention because it opened up the door to everything we now associate with recording. It enabled the commercial recording industry. It provided new research tools. It was the basis of signal capture, which has all sorts of scientific implications as well as the ones that we're familiar with for entertainment. Today, we're going to hear the oldest Edison recording that's been yet reproduced. It was recorded in 1878 and it was restored this past year. Due to its age and how fragile it is, and some of you may have looked at it in the case, we could only play it using some modern digital tools. It was hopeless to think that we could put a needle, a stylus, back down on that cylinder, that foil, and play it by the sort of traditional means. Now, it shares in that character with most of the early recorded sound artifacts. Most of them from the 19th century would similarly not be playable by normal means. And they're in obsolete formats, they're delicate, they're damaged. So at the Lawrence Berkeley Lab, where I work, we started a project some years ago in collaboration with the Library of Congress to use modern, non-invasive, optical, light-based methods to try and restore these recordings. And I will tell you about how that was done in the next few minutes. And it's an example of a field which is called preservation science. It's a whole range of scientific methods that people bring to bear to the problem of preserving art, artifacts, media, all the things that we value for the information that they contain. So, as I said, the 1878 St. Louis recording was restored at our lab, and it was part of a larger project to address these needs of early recordings. And if I kind of systematically list, what was our goals, and because we didn't start out with the Edison recording, we started out, before that. We wanted to create tools that would enable archives and libraries to, in an automated way, to digitize their collections. We wanted to find a way to systematically address the needs of these early recordings with all their diversity. And you're going to see soon how diverse they really were, how many different forms they took. So let me start off with a basic question, and that's going to speak to how sound was recorded in the beginning, which is, what is sound? Well, as everybody knows, matter is either in the form of a gas, a liquid, or a solid. And you know that if we exert pressure on matter, we can compress it. Sound is basically a wave of pressure that travels through matter. We're most familiar with it traveling through the atmosphere, but it can also travel through solids and liquids as well. When we increase the density of matter, we compress it. When we decrease that density, we perform what's called a rarefaction. And it's basically a series of these density variations that travel as a wave, which we call sound. And the period, the time between these compression changes, is what we refer to as the pitch or the tone. And the amplitude is essentially the loudness, how strong the signal is. And we experience the sensation of sound when these pressure waves impinge on our ears. And so these are supposed to be, atoms or molecules in the air, and it's showing how their density varies between the speaker and the ear. And this is supposed to sort of very schematically indicate the pitch by how many hills and valleys, and the amplitude by how high. So how is sound recorded? So sound energy can be transferred from one material to another. You can beat a drum, you can pluck a string, you can stand near a speaker and you can feel it in your body if the speaker is loud. You can speak into a paper cup, and if you touch the bottom, you'll feel the bottom of that cup vibrate. So sound can be directly recorded if we can find some way to capture this mechanical effect permanently in some material. So what did Edison do? In 1877, what Edison was doing is he was experimenting with methods to record the discrete impulses that a telegraph makes. His idea was, it takes a while to hit the key and send a message down the wire. The wires could actually hold much more information than a human person could create just by tapping. So he thought, if he could have you tap slowly and record a record of the dots and dashes on paper, he could then spin the paper fast and use that through a mechanical system to send a telegraph message at a much greater rate. Apparently, this led him to the idea that he doesn't have to just, record the discrete impulses of the telegraph, but that he could perhaps find a way to record the continuous impulses of the voice or of music in a material. And the material that he hit upon was tinfoil. And this is a picture of the original Edison recording machine, reproduction of it, not the actual original machine, but that's what it looked like. And this is a sketch from the patent application. Here's a cylinder. He wrapped the foil around the cylinder, and there was a diaphragm and a stylus. And by speaking into the speaker, the diaphragm would vibrate. The stylus would then emboss into the surface of the foil. And as he turned the cylinder, it was on a screw. So, and you can sort of see that screw here, it would gradually move from left to right, and it would draw the sound pattern in a helix around the cylinder. This is what he wrote, and it's really interesting to read. I designed a little machine using a cylinder provided with grooves around the surface. Over this was to be placed tinfoil, which easily received and recorded the movements of the diaphragm. Croce, the machinist, when he had nearly finished it, asked what it was for. I told him I was going to record talking and then have the machine talk back. He thought it absurd. However, it was finished, the foil was put on, I then shouted, "Mary had a little lamb," etc. I adjusted the reproducer, and the machine reproduced it perfectly. I was never so taken aback in my life. Everybody was astonished. I was always afraid of things that worked the first time. The line that really strikes me is, I was never so taken aback in my life. But just imagine what it felt like. You had never heard a machine speak, something that we are so familiar with. You had never heard that. Can you imagine what that must have been like for him to experience that? And I need to mention that Mr. Croce, who was the machinist that apparently fabricated the first machine, one of the artifacts that you see out on the table was actually from the Croce family and was passed on to my side. So, here's a photograph of the 1878 St. Louis foil, which is sitting on the table here. And if you look carefully, you can actually see the embossed effect of the sound in this groove that runs along. And so what happened is the groove runs from one end to the other, then this thing would have been wrapped around, so it would have picked up, come around and around and around. And that's how the first playable sound recording was configured, and that's what was tested and demonstrated just a few months later in St. Louis. Now, many people know, and I have to pay tribute where it's due, there are actually two inventions. Edison in 1877, and this is a nice sort of Collier's or whatever magazine of the day, illustration of the tinfoil, the sheet, it's wrapped around the cylinder, person speaks into the thing and then light it back and so forth. Really nice illustration. But really, some years before, as early as late 1850s, 1860, this man, Leon Scott de Martinville, a French inventor, built a similar machine. But instead of embossing the sound on foil, he inscribed it on paper. This paper was covered with soot, and he scratched the pattern of the sound. He built a sound recorder, but he had no way to play it back. So Edison is the man to record sound and play it back. And that was really the transformative invention. That set the whole mechanism going. So I have to say that it's, for me, and I hope I'll share this with you, there's a greater significance to all of this. More than just a tool to record sound, I think it's really important to view Edison's innovations in the broader kind of technological context of the time. The 1800s were a period of amazing innovation and invention. And people use the word heroic because so much of it was centered around individuals, a person who said, I'm going to do this. The developments that occurred in that century, I think you can argue to a very large extent, they underlie our entire communication and information age that sort of went beyond the Industrial Revolution that started earlier and was a new revolution. And everybody talks about how we live in the information age today. But really, the techniques, the tools, the methods, most of them got fleshed out in the 1800s. And Edison's work on sound recording sits squarely in that context. And I just, I tried to make a shopping list of, your favorite 19th century breakthroughs, beginning in a little bit earlier in the 20s and 30s, Niépce and Daguerre with photography, and that's the famous view of the town, attributed somehow to be one of the earliest photographs. Morse and others with the telegraph, then Leon Scott with the phonograph, the prototype for a failed commercial product. A complete disaster, terrifying children and costing their parents. But it's believed to actually be the first recording of a woman's voice, and it's familiar. I hope you can recognize it, even though I've given you a hint. Did you get that? Yeah. I would think of that as sort of the 1887's version of the iPad. All right, so here we are. Oh, one more stop on the way. Now it's 1881. And here's a little handiwork from Alexander Graham Bell and Charles Sumner Tainter. This is probably the earliest example of a disc record that is still in existence. We restored it in 2011 using these 3D optical scans. It's in the collection of the Smithsonian. And it's a very short thing. It's 3 trills. Trills are this. Okay? And then the numbers 1 through 6. Turns out that Bell and his collaborators used the trill a lot when they were testing their sound recording ideas, because it was something that they could reference to. So here it goes. This is the first disc. Okay, there's the picture of the foil. And you can see the folds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here's the ragged ends. So Chris Hunter, the curator at my site, had already had it pretty well prepared and flattened by a conservator. And so we decided that the best way to handle it was to put it on a flat system and scan it with the confocal probe in that way. Here's a picture of the foil as it's mounted on a stage. This is under the control of a computer, which can move it this way or that way. And this black object with this silver collar, that's the probe. And if you look closely, you can see the probe near the foil, and there's a little spot of light, and that's where the measurements, these color-dispersed measurements, are taking place. It's a bit like a lawnmower. We couldn't cover the whole foil in one measurement, so we just went from one end to the other and back and forth. So as that light is flickering, we're actually measuring the foil almost 2,000 times a second. We're collecting profiles of the foil. And indeed, here's our kind of analysis view of the foil. Now I've drawn a red line this way and a red line that way. So the red line this way is the same one we looked at before. That basically shows the profile of the foil. But when it was played, this is a tiny little detail of it. The needle would have run along here, gone all the way to the other end, and then of course it was wrapped around, so it would have come back, and then it would come through here, back around again, and so forth. And so this red line that's running along this direction is depicted in this view, which shows a very continuous, smooth oscillation of the surface, which corresponds to a certain pitch of sound, a tiny little snippet of a longer audio waveform, which you would have recognized as some music or voice when it was finally put together. So let's talk a little bit about the quality, because what you're going to hear is not going to sound like what you're used to hearing from your MP3 players and so forth. This is a tinfoil artifact with significant wear and damage. Fortunately, most of the damage is confined to those 7 folds in the ends. And so this is a picture of the time, essentially, versus loudness. Okay? And most of the speaking and music you're in here is in this little narrow blue band. And these large kind of things that look like Christmas trees or bushes or whatever, those are bursts of noise that correspond to those times when we're crossing the 7 folds and the 8th end of the foil. And so I've numbered them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. And they just repeat. So when you hear it, you'll hear a very characteristic periodic kind of chunk, 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 chunk every time we pass through that. Here's the content. It's about a minute long. For the first few seconds, it's just quiet. You can call that the lead-in, and you'll hear the chunk, chunk, chunk. Then, the next 24 seconds are instrumental music on some sort of brass, cornet, trumpet, bugle, something of that sort. Then there's about 10 seconds of Mary Had a Little Lamb. Then another 9 seconds of laughter. Another 11 seconds of Old Mother Hubbard. And then some more laughter and a notable speech. And now, when we get to the Old Mother Hubbard part, a number of people today in the news and so forth attributed it to a woman. I don't believe it's a woman, I believe it's a man, but I believe that the speed that they were cranking this thing at slowed down a bit at that point, which when we play it back at constant speed, makes it sound like it's like a much higher pitched voice. And Typically, a woman's voice has a higher pitch than a man's voice. Okay. So I broke it up so you could actually, you don't have to hear the whole thing at once. And so the first thing we're going to hear is the click, click, click. And that's going to go by pretty fast. Okay, did you get that? Okay, so now we're going to listen to the music, and you're going to hear the same clicking, but a little bit of music under it as well. Okay, did everybody hear the music? Okay, good. Now, a little more challenge. They said, let's make this harder and harder as we go through. So here's Mary Had a Little Lamb. Did you get that? Yes. Want to hear it again? Yes. Okay. Okay, now laughter. Did you get that? Okay, good. Now old Mother Hubbard. Now remember, it's going to start off sounding really high-pitched, and then it's going to switch to a slower sound that you got from Mary. Did you get that? Yes. Okay, why don't we do it one more time? Okay, and then that's followed by more laughter and a little more speaking. Okay, got that? Good. Now, people often ask, can't you clean this up more? And the answer is yes. This could be cleaned up more, but it becomes a question of what do you want to do? Do you want to take a painting by a great artist from 500 years ago and a little piece of it's missing, and do you want to paint in the missing part because you can guess what it is? Or do you want to take a minimal approach and leave things as close to sort of some stable configuration as possible? And our general approach is to be a minimalist about this. Yes, you could go in and you could take out these clump, clump, clump sounds, but they're actually there. And we wanted to kind of provide a basic sound restoration of this, and then it's up to people if they want, for the purposes of display or access, to create more heavily filtered versions. You can do that. The version that you just listened to had a basic amount of cleanup that our programs normally do, and a restriction of the frequencies to keep out frequencies that are really not part of the recorded sound context of what a machine like that could do. If you leave in those sounds, you can actually get, a kind of noisier version. I won't play the whole thing, but just to show you. Okay, as opposed to so already you can see that, and that's kind of what I played for you. It's some amount of what I think is, fair restriction to, to the noise content. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say about how sound is recorded, the history of sound recording, how it fits into the historical context, what we've done in Berkeley with the Library of Congress to develop these techniques, and we're really trying to reach out to the broad history and the breadth of collections. And then, of course, the really great story of this artifact and how it came that we're all here together tonight. The St. Louis tinfoil is our point of closest approach, I would say, to the beginning of recorded sound as we have come to know it in our culture. And today's digital technology, for example, the work that we did at Berkeley Lab, I think, provide a window on the entire early period of sound recording and the research, artistic, historical, commercial, and other legacies that represents. So if you want more information, irene.lbl.gov is our website, and there will be links there, at least by tomorrow, to all the sound recordings of the Edison foil, and you can also find those online today through some of the news agencies. So if you want to listen to these over and over again, or you put them on your mobile device, you can do that. I want to thank everybody tonight, and the museum, and the Pierce, and everybody who's helped to put this together. And Museum of Innovation and Science. I hope you'll come and visit frequently and see all the great things they have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, we're not quite done yet. I wish some of my science lectures at college were that interesting. I would have been much more successful in science. I noticed the engineer who did help create the recording device you had mentioned was Cruzy.
Yes.
Cruzy?
Yes.
There is a Cruzy Avenue in Schenectady.
I see.
He was, and we texted Chris Hunter, who texted back using modern technology. He was the first director, head of the plant that eventually became General Electric, but worked for Edison prior to GE here in Schenectady. So I thought that was interesting. Gwen Spicer, you are here. Gwen Spicer is over there, and Gwen Spicer is the person who conserved that foil so that we could have the analysis done and enjoy this piece. Now, Chris Hunter also researched archival materials to try and figure out the identity of the voice on that tin foil. Microfilm archives of the St. Louis Post newspaper from 1878 included a description of one of Edison's first tin foil demonstrations in St. Louis, an ad for the demonstrations, and the identity of the person giving the demonstrations at the time. The demonstrations began on May 30th, 1878. Advertisements appeared daily through June 15th, and on June 17th, a notice in the amusement section said that I.X. Peck gave the demonstrations daily. I.X. Peck was the pen name for a humor writer for the St. Louis Republican newspaper named Thomas Mason. And according to the Edison serial number lists, an exhibition phonograph was sold to Thomas Mason of St. Louis in early May 1878. This archival evidence indicates that that is indeed Thomas Mason's voice, reciting "Mary Had a Little Lad" and "Old Mother Hubbard," and presumably doing the laughing too on that Edison tinfoil. Remarkable, just remarkable. Great work, Chris.
There was a first time that sound was recorded. There was a first time when people heard their own voices. And this represents the oldest known version of one of these recordings from 1878. So what they did is to map this thing optically. We couldn't touch it. To touch it is to destroy it. So they took a very, very high density three-dimensional map optically, and then with some very sophisticated software they were able to basically construct the groove here, which looks like a bunch of grooves, but when you wrap it around and trace, it's one single groove. They're able to do that in software and then model what the stylus would do in response to those bumps as one played it back.